and our annual Remembrance service. A special welcome to the servicemen and women that are here today, either in person or via our live stream. We understand that over the last few months, it has been difficult for everyone, and we really appreciate that everyone was able to join us today. My name is Crystal Lindsay, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies this morning. Before we begin, I would like to go over some housekeeping. If everyone can please remember to switch their phones to silent. The amenities, if you're looking for them, are outside the building and to my left. In the event of an emergency, the emergency exits are at the back of the building and both sides of the stage, and the meeting spot is across the street. Can I also remind everyone about the COVID restrictions? Please be sure to maintain social distancing and be sure to check in and out with our COVID marshal. As we commence the formalities, I would like to acknowledge the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the land upon which this event is being held. The Darug people are a part of the oldest continuous culture in the world, and we formally pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We also acknowledge any First Nations community members that are present today. I'm pleased to be joined this morning by Warrant Officer Class 1 Warwick Butterworth from the Australian Army Aviation Corps, along with Chief Petty Officer Naval Police Coxswain Roy Wright from the Royal Australian Navy, and Private Raymond Chan from the 1st Joint Movements Group. We're here today to remember those who took part in World War I and the wars that followed. At 11 a.m. on the 11th of November, 1918, the guns fell silent after more than 4 years of continuous warfare. The Allied forces chose this Armistice Day and time to remember those who took part. In the 4 years of the war, over 300,000 Australians served, and over 60,000 of them lost their lives. This significant loss cast a long shadow over the post-war decades. After World War II, Armistice Day was renamed Remembrance Day to recognise those who took part in both World Wars. Today, Remembrance Day recognises those who have served in all wars and conflicts throughout the world. At Rookwood, this event enables us to remember not only Rookwood's veterans, but all veterans who have served to improve the lives of others. During this service, in accordance with official procedures, we will pause at 11 a.m. for a minute of silence. This will be followed by a traditional wreath-laying ceremony. And now, I would like to welcome to the stage Warrant Officer Class 1 Warwick Butterworth from the Australian Army Aviation Corps.
Distinguished guests, veterans, ladies and gentlemen, I acknowledge the Darug people of the land on which we are meeting today and pay my respects to our elders, both past, present and emerging. We also would like to pay my respects to the Indigenous men and women who have contributed to the defence of Australia in times of peace and war. At 11 a.m. on the 11th of November 1918, a peace agreement was signed between Germany and the Allies, ending World War I, founding Armistice Day. Since then, we have seen Australians again and again answer the call to arms for the love and defence of their country. ANZACs served again in the Second World War, in Korea, in Vietnam, in the Gulf War and in Afghanistan. This day has become a day to commemorate all the war dead. I'm pleased to be invited here to speak today on this solemn occasion and have been asked to provide my reflections of what remembrance means. On the 10th of October 1984, this young Aussie answered the call to service inspired by a personal impression and respect of what Australian soldiers stood for, entwined with an aspiration to gain life experiences as a springboard to conquer life's challenges and potentially lay ahead. This was to be the beginning of an enduring journey over the next 36 years, seeing this impression and respect grow. Many challenges were met and conquered, all whilst being tethered by the constant reality of the vocation through memories of mates and fellow unit members who served in the ultimate sacrifice, doing it their way what was passionate for them, doing what they loved, defending their homeland. Unfortunately, there are also those who served the ultimate sacrifice, becoming victims of the silent enemy whilst combating their personal conflict with the lingering mental battlefield. Today is a special day when we remember all those, whether service personnel or civilians of every nation, who suffered or continue to suffer through war. In particular, we remember those who served in the Australian Defence Forces in active service from the Boer War to Afghanistan, including those currently serving with United Nations missions. We remember those who paid the supreme sacrifice so that we and the people of other nations can live in peace. We remember those who continue to suffer through their personal or physical or mental scars, including those next to kin whose grief and sense of loss can never be ceased. This is also a day of thanks and quiet reflection on what a wonderful, lucky nation we live in. It is a time to reflect on Australia's commitment to continue to contribute to peace in other parts of the world. The men and women that lay here are accompanied by distant mates in similar resting places who have suffered the same fate. Almost still lie in distant lands from the Boer War, 2 World Wars and Korea, through to Vietnam, Afghanistan and numerous other conflicts and operations. For the souls who lay with no name or history are represented by the unknown soldier interned at the Australian War Memorial. Because the Great War was a mad, brutal, awful struggle, distinguished more often than not by military and political incompetence, because the waste of human life was so terrible that some said victory was scarcely discernible from defeat, and because the war which was supposed to end all wars, in fact sowed the seeds of a second, even more terrible war. We might think that the unknown soldier died in vain. But in honouring our war dead, as we always have, and as we do today, we declare that this is not true. For out of the war came a lesson which transcended the horror and tragedy of the inexcusable folly. It is a lesson about ordinary people, and the lesson was that they were not ordinary. On all sides, they were the heroes of that war, not the generals and the politicians, but the soldiers, sailors and nurses, those who taught us to endure hardship, to show courage, to be bold as well as resilient, to believe in themselves and to stick together. It is not too much to hope, therefore, that the unknown Australian soldier might continue to serve his country. He might enshrine a nation's love of peace and remind us that in the sacrifice of the men and women who lay there is faith enough for all of us. They went in our uniform, under our flag, in our name, but their lives were finally given up in support of one another. The sacrifice of each one of them reminds us that there are some truths by which we live that are worth fighting to defend. After the bloodbath that was Fromelles, a Sergeant Simon Fraser spent 3 breathtaking days bringing in the wounded from no man's land. Rising from the fog to penetrate his exhaustion, a lone voice pleaded, "Don't forget me, Cobber." He didn't. We won't. We never will. For we are young and we are free, lest we forget.
Thank you, Warwick. You've certainly given us a lot to think about this morning, and we appreciate you being here to share your story with us. I would now like to welcome Chief Petty Officer, Naval Police Coxswain Roy Wright from the Royal Australian Navy.
As a child, I used to visit my nan's house up in Newcastle, where I remember when I was about 5 years old, I saw this photo of a young man in her lounge room. I asked my nan, "Who is this?" She said, "He is my brother." As the years went by, the photo remained in her lounge room. Even in 1986, when I joined the Australian Regular Army and I took the weekend off from Holsworthy to visit my nan to mow her grass, I saw that photo in her lounge room and it remained there. In 2010, my nan, who reached 99 years of age, was moved to a nursing home, and when I went to visit her, I told my 6-year-old daughter to hold her hand. As she lay on her bed with her eyes closed, I said, "Nan, what are you thinking about?" And she said, "I'm thinking about when I was a little girl, Roy, I looked around the room, and at the foot of the bed, I saw a small wardrobe, which I could imagine contained a few basic clothes. Then on the wall above the Nan's head was not of her 2 daughters, nor was it of her 9 grandchildren or her late husband. But it was the photo of her brother, the same photo I saw for all those years. I did not have to ask my Nan what she was thinking. I knew. It was not until a couple of weeks ago when I was informed that I would be delivering a presentation. So what better way to find out more about my Nan's brother? My Nan's brother name is Cecil Robert Lawless, born in Merriwa, about 1 hour north of Singleton, New South Wales. He had 8 siblings. It was not uncommon back in those days to have large families. In 1916, Cecil was working as an assistant clerk at the Liverpool Council when on the 19th of June 1916, at the age of 20, he volunteered to enlist. Of note, he did not have to, because he had a job and his brother was fighting a war. He was a member of the Light Horse Regiment. Private Lawless, 6119, completed his basic training at Cootamundra, New South Wales. On the 25th of October 1916, Cecil boarded the troop ship Ascantus, departing Sydney. On the 28th of December 1916, Cecil disembarked the troop ship in Devonport, UK, where he joined his unit, the 17th, the 18th Battalion, the Australian Imperial Force. On the 24th of February 1917, Cecil wrote a postcard to my Nan, Madge. I will now read this postcard out to you. Darling Madge, wishing her many happy returns for the 16th of June. I am sending this rather early in case I will not be able to get one in France. I suppose you are growing a big girl now. How far are you above my mark on the kitchen post? With lots of love from your big brother. Kiss, kiss, kiss. My Nan was turning 6 in June. For a brother to send a postcard to his 5-year-old sister just prior to going to France to fight shows the character of the person Cecil was. On the 3rd of May 1917, on a field in France, the Battle of Somme, Cecil received the gunshot wounds to his abdomen. He was taken to the casualty care station for treatment. Then 3 days later, on the 6th of May 1917, Cecil died of the gunshot wounds to his stomach. He was 21 years of age. I will not forget the date of the 6th of May 1917, because exactly 69 years later, being on the 6th of May 1986, I enlisted in the I enlisted in the Australian Regular Army. Additionally, I will not forget the year he died, because I was 17 and Cecil died in 1917. On that day Cecil died, my Nan was 5 years old, and at that moment she lost the excitement of running to the letterbox to receive postcards. Lost the hope of seeing her big brother again, her idol. For the next 94 years, my Nan suffered of never seeing her brother again. Cecil was buried in France, and only one family member has visited him, and that was in 1950 by one of his sisters. My story is sad. However, there are thousands of sad stories just like this, and mine is just one of them. And I'm glad I've told you this story, my family story. When I was getting the print of Cecil done at Office Works the other weekend, my 19-year-old son, Jared, was with me, where I told him the story, and his response was, "That is a sad story, Dad." I said, "Hopefully you can pass this story on, so we will remember them." I am positive Cecil epitomised the defence values of service, courage, respect, integrity, and excellence. I will now read the poem of Flanders Fields. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the headstones, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing, fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields. Lest we forget. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing such a personal and amazing experience with us. I'm speechless. I would now like to share some of the stories of Rookwood's unofficial soldiers. I can't even speak now. I'm so blown away by your story. What I want to do is talk about Rookwood's servicemen and women that are recognised in unofficial war graves, as we believe that they too should be recognised for their contribution. Within Rookwood, we have identified over 1,800 servicemen and women from World War I that are memorialised within our grounds. Each year, we continue to share their stories, restore their graves, and in some cases, have a memorial marker placed where there was otherwise an unmarked spot. This year, memorials have been installed in remembrance of Albert Henry Fullwood, Alexander Dmitri, Arthur Kodak, Metrofan Korpatz, Peter John Potter, Alexander Gusarov, 5 of whom are a part of our Russian community. With thanks to the Friends of Rookwood and our Russian community representatives who helped us to uncover their stories. To share some of these stories, I will invite 2 of my colleagues to come to the stage, Dimity Darbin and Jared Cheney.
A soldier was shipped all the way to Egypt, where they discovered trachoma and cataracts in both eyes and had to be sent back to Australia. Another, because of wounds sustained in action while fighting in France, was unable to work. He was denied Australian naturalisation because the government denied his request to waive the fee. He eventually received citizenship only two years before he passed away in 1945. Until today, their graves were unmarked. At Rookwood General Cemetery, we ensure a special focus on the service people recognise in unofficial war graves throughout the cemetery. In 2015, staff volunteers began identifying and documenting marked and unmarked war graves of ANZACs located throughout Rookwood. Each year, our monumental heritage team complete conservation work to a specified number of World War I gravestones, and in addition, we provide a handful of new memorials for individuals in unmarked graves at Rookwood. Our team has uncovered some incredible stories that we share with you today. While you listen to these stories, we invite you to think about them as individuals and remember their service.
Albert Henry Fullwood was born in Birmingham in the UK on the 15th of March 1863. He studied at the Birmingham School of Art and moved to Sydney in 1883. Fullwood married Clyda Blanche Newman on the 13th of October 1896 in Sydney. They had 2 sons and a daughter. The family left for America in 1899 during the economic depression and then later moved to London. Fullwood joined the Allied Art Corps. Later he was a sergeant in the Royal Army Medical Corps and later an Australian official war artist attached to the headquarters of the 5th Australian Division. He was worked in France between May and August 1918 and in France and Belgium from 1918 to January 1919. He spent 4 months in all on the battlefields and received the rank of honorary lieutenant. He died from pneumonia in Waverley in October 1930.
Peter John Potter was born on the 7th of June 1886 in Saratov, Russia, to a farming family. He immigrated to Australia on the 7th of November 1911 on the Niku Maru and lived in Brisbane working as a painter. He was naturalised as an Australian citizen in January 1914 and enlisted to serve the World War I on 7th of August 1915. He served with artillery unit on the Western Front as a gunner. He returned to Australia on the 22nd of December 1919 and was discharged on the 12th of April 1920. In 1917, while in England, he married an English girl, Victoria Winifred Streeton, and sailed to Australia with his wife and 2 children. He worked as a painter in Brisbane and in Sydney. His 2 sons enlisted in the AIF during World War II, and the oldest son, John Victor William Potter, was killed in Libya in 1941. He died in June 1951 in Marylands.
Alexander Dmitri, also known as Alex, was born on the 12th of October 1887 in Yaunberg, Russia. He arrived in Newcastle, New South Wales as a seaman from Brazil on the 15th of July 1912 on the Olga and worked as a labourer in Rockhampton, Queensland. On the 22nd of July 1915, he enlisted in the AIF in Rockhampton and on the 5th of October 1915 sailed to Egypt on the HMAT Wilder A69 with the 9th Battalion. Upon arrival, he was diagnosed with trachoma and cataracts in both eyes and invalided to Australia. He was naturalised in 1937 and died in Sydney on 8th of September 1947.
At 11 a.m, we will pause for a minute of silence. As a result, we will take a break from the storytelling at this point in the service. And now, as we remember those who served, I invite everyone to stand for the ode, which will be recited by Private Raymond Chan of the 1st Joint Movements Group.
Thank you, everyone. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them, and lest we forget.
Please remain standing for the last post, which will be followed by a minute of silence, the rouse, and the Australian National Anthem. Please be seated. We will now resume the storytelling with Timothy and Jared.
Arthur Kodak was born in Revel, Estonia on 24th of March 1891. He arrived in Newcastle on the Doradon on 4th of February 1910 from Argentina and worked as a compositor, a sailor, and after the war as a labourer and a storeman. He enlisted in the war on the 5th of July 1915 and embarked on the HMAT Kiara A55 on the 16th of August 1915. He was wounded in action with a gunshot wound to the chest and groin while in France in 1916 and was discharged on the 31st of May 1918. We know from glimpses through official correspondence that Arthur's struggle after the war as he was able to return to his occupation as a seaman due to his injuries. He had served as Russia subject and made several applications to become an Australian citizen after marriage to an Australian woman. Due to his injuries, he was unemployed and unable to afford the fee. He petitioned the Commonwealth Government to waive the fee as his poverty was a result of the injuries he sustained in the defence of the Commonwealth, but they refused. He spent time in unemployment camps and hospitals. It was not until 1943 that he was employed as a storeman and granted naturalisation. He died only 2 years later on the 27th of August 1945 in Redfern as an Australian citizen.
Mitrofan Korpats was born in 1889 in Dobratov, Krolovets, Chernigov province of Ukraine. Not much is known about him before he enlisted as a 27-year-old miner from Helensburgh, New South Wales on the 14th of January 1916. Mitrofan embarked from Sydney on HMAT A38 Ulysses with the 1st Tunnelling Mining Corps on the 20th of February 1916. He arrived in France on the 5th of May 1916 and saw service on the Western Front as a tunneler. On the 28th of October 1917, Mitrofan was admitted to hospital sick, no reason given, and he returned to his unit on the 6th of December 1917. On the 14th of March 1918, he was wounded in action by gas. This affected his eyes quite badly, and he was returned to Australia in 1919 and discharged medically unfit on the 18th of September 1919. He died on the 1st of April 1920 under curious circumstances. The newspapers originally reported a murder, but the coroner's inquest deemed it a death by suicide. Mitrofan was found near Lady Macquarie's chair with a bullet wound to the left side of his head. While no gun was ever found, when his residence was searched, they found the same type of ammunition.
Alexander Gusarov was born in Lebyasy, Grondaz, near St. Petersburg, Russia. He came from a family of tugboat pilots and worked on English ships, landing in Australia in October 1916. He lived in Mackey Street, Glebe. He was 26 years old when he enlisted in Sydney on the 23rd of December 1916 as a Russian subject and served with the 55th Battalion on the Western Front. He suffered heavy wounds to his leg during the final advance of the Hindenburg Line offensive in September 1918. After the war, he lived in Sydney working as a labourer. We do not know a lot about his post-war life, apart from an appearance in a newspaper where he spent 3 days in hospital after being assaulted and robbed. Alexander died in Newtown, Sydney, on 2nd of September 1935.
These stories remind us that these men were human beings with lives before and after wartime. They had families, jobs, hopes, loves, and losses. While the guns stopped at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November, these men carried the war with them for the rest of their lives.
Thank you, Jiminy and Jared. As you can see here at Rookwood, we're very passionate about sharing the stories of the people that served, those that died, and those that lived on, and we want to remember all of them. If anyone does know of any other war graves within Rookwood, or unofficial war graves, I should say, please do get in touch with the office because we'd like to hear about them and research them and document their stories as well. At this stage in the service, we'll now move to the wreath-laying ceremony. As I call your name, please come forward and place a wreath in front of the memorial image. Mr. Warwick Butterworth from the Australian Army Aviation Corps. Mr. Roy Wright from the Royal Australian Navy. Mr. Alexei Ivanchev, our Russian community representative. Mr. Jeffrey Brazel, Director of Business Services at Rookwood General Cemetery. Mr. Bob Turner from the Western Metropolitan District Council. Mr. Joshua Tilden from the Rookwood General Cemetery Monumental Heritage Team. Mr. Simeon Boykov on behalf of the Russian Cossacks. Mr. Valery Malinovsky, on behalf of the Russian Double-Headed Eagle Historical Society. And now, as our service comes to a close, I would like to thank you all for being here today, both in person and those that have joined via our live streaming. With special thanks to our guest speakers, Mr. Warwick Butterworth and Mr. Roy Wright, along with our staff that made this event possible. Following the service, for those that are present, we will be serving morning tea outside the All Souls. And as you depart, please take a poppy and place it in the poppy wall on the village green, as you remember all of those that served in World War I and the wars that followed. Thank you.